Hey everybody, my name is Mike and I'm back with another exciting episode of bizzy.tv. And where we left off yesterday, we were trying to implement Google authentication in our new product that we're creating a minimum viable product for to demonstrate to our customer. And we're using a few new technologies that are new to me. The first one is ASP.NET Core, which is kind of a new stripped down version of ASP.NET. ASP.NET has been around for probably 15 years now, 10, 15 years, something like that. And over the years, it had grown so bloated and sort of unwieldy that Microsoft decided a couple of years ago to pretty much start from scratch and make a new version called ASP.NET Core. So that's new to me. I haven't had time to get into that previously, so we're exploring it here on the stream. And the other technology that I'm looking at is another Microsoft invention called DocumentDB. I'm used to using table-based databases such as SQL Server, and when you use a table-based database, you usually talk to it through a technology called Entity Framework. So those are the technologies I'm familiar with. For this product, I was trying to use their DocumentDB database, which stores data in the form of documents, not tables. So there's a couple of new technologies to me, and we started playing with those yesterday, and today we're going to try to push ahead a little bit on that. Now, one thing I wanted to fix before we moved forward was yesterday we registered with Google and set up our credentials. It turns out I missed a step in the instructions from Microsoft. So if you look here, after our site redirects the user to Google to authenticate, Google is going to redirect the user back to us. So we need to give it the correct URL to use to redirect that user back to us. And yesterday, when I set up the credentials, I kind of arbitrarily chose this URL, home/login Google. Turns out if you look at these instructions carefully, they actually want you to use this URL right here. So we need to fix the ending of it and make it signin-Google. So we'll just go over here, take off what we put previously, and we'll fix that and save it. And I'm assuming that that's, oh, there we go. Let's just double check that again. Okay, so that's been saved. So now Google knows where to send that user back to us. So we can close that down and get back to our instructions here. So the next thing I wanted to do today is start working on the authentication parts inside of our project. So let's minimize that. And I'm actually going to close out of Visual Studio because we probably started the project incorrectly, because when I created the Platinum Hydra Visual Studio product, I told it I didn't want to use authentication because my intention at that time was that we were going to implement our own authentication from scratch. But after looking into it a little bit more last night, it appears that Microsoft they already have a Google authentication solution that you can use, but it relies on the individual authentication being included in the template when you created the sample project. So we have a couple of choices. What we can do is stay with what we have and kind of diverge from what Microsoft intended you to do, which means we're going to be on our own to a large degree in terms of figuring out what to do. Or another option is we could look for a third-party Google authentication solution and try plugging that in, which would probably work, but it's going to take longer to figure out, and we'll probably go down some blind alleys trying to find one that works. So I think the quickest and easiest thing for us to do today is we'll just blow away the project we created yesterday and start again from scratch. But this time we're going to tell it that we want that individual authentication. Then we'll enable SSL like we did yesterday. We'll set the starting URL, and we don't have to create the Google authentication credentials again, and we don't have to set up the secret store manager like we did yesterday. So most of what we did yesterday we're still good with. We just need to recreate that project with the proper authentication. So let's do that now. So we'll open up our drive and we'll go to the projects and we'll blow away Platinum Hydra. Well, actually, let's just rename that to, we'll just call it old. It says it's open in another program, probably this command line. Okay, and so now let's go into Visual Studio and let's recreate that project. New project, web core. We're going to call it Platinum Hydra. And we'll create, actually let's not create a directory for this. We're just going to put it in the same directory. And we're going to say web application, but here's the difference. So the last time we created this project, we chose no authentication. Now we're going to switch this to be individual user accounts. And one of the reasons I didn't choose this last time is because if you read the directions here, it says for applications that store user profiles in a SQL Server database. Well, just a few minutes ago, I said we're not going to use a SQL Server database this time. So that's why I didn't select this previously. But it turns out after I researched it a bit, it's probably going to be easier to go down this route and then just switch the database from SQL Server to DocumentDB after the fact. So let's just go down this road. We'll leave everything else the same. We'll create this project. Okay, and then we'll edit the project here like we did the first time. We'll go to debug, we'll enable SSL, and then we'll copy this URL and paste it here. So that's exactly the same thing we did yesterday. Let's see, 44354. We might need to double check the Google. Let's see here. I just want to make sure the port number hasn't changed. In what we told it yesterday. So we'll go back into our project here. And it was the Google Plus API. And let's look at our credentials. And we'll double check this. Yeah, so we had 44306 yesterday. We need to fix that to 44354. So we'll change that here. 44354, and then we'll save that. Because again, Google needs to redirect the user back to us, and this is where it's going to send that user. Now that we've recreated this project, we're listening on 44354. We're not listening on that port that we had before, so we needed to update that on Google's side so it knows where to send people. So we'll save that. And it says restore completed, so let's compile this and see if it runs. Okay, it built. Let's see if it runs. Okay, and it runs. And notice that now we have register and login. And so if we were to proceed, we would be able to register a new account, but we haven't plugged in our social media capability yet. So we're going to stop there and not go any further. And so instead, we'll resume with the instructions we were using yesterday. So we've gotten through this part where we registered with Google. And we stored the client ID in secret. Let's double check that because remember we made a new folder here. So let's make sure we still have those. Okay, so the command was .NET user-secrets list. Okay, so it says there's no secrets configured. So let's go back in here. And here's the client ID and the secret. So we'll just restore those in the secret manager according to these instructions. So we'll start with that. And we just need to put our client ID here, which is this. And we need to store our secret. Which is that. Okay, so now if we list, we should be able to see both of those. So there they are. And so now under is development, we need to add the add user secrets, which I think is actually there already. Let's just double check. Yeah, it's right here. So that's already included. And so here's where you enable the Google middleware. Now, Microsoft calls this middleware. I call it magic because, and this is a frustration I have with Microsoft templates and demo sites. Microsoft sort of creates these things to make it look easy, but in so doing, they also they hide a lot of stuff behind the scenes that it's doing to make it work. So, and then that's the part that I call magic, because there's a whole bunch of stuff going on behind the scenes that you can't see. So it's kind of magical, and it just kind of works. But the problem comes in when you want, as the developer of the application, when you want to modify what's going on in the background, well, it's all hidden away from you. So you don't even kind of know where to start, because you can't see it, so you can't change it, and you can't even study it to see what it's doing. So this is kind of where I get a little bit frustrated with Microsoft, but we'll just continue playing along here for a while, and we'll do what they're telling us to do to get this configured. So in configure service, we just add those lines to configure the Google authentication. And we probably need to add a reference to the library. Yep. So I think it tells us, right, we need to install the package here so that it knows how to authenticate to Google. So let's go into the project settings again, and I believe it's under dependencies. And I think we can add it here. Okay, so we saved that, and now Visual Studio is restoring the package for us. This package that we just added. Okay, so it's done with that. And now we should be able to go back here and resolve that. Okay, just popped in. So now Visual Studio could find the Google options. I think it may have had us put that in the wrong place. Let's see here. Oh, that's configure services. Okay, we want to configure the app, so we put this in the wrong place. And actually, I'm going to reformat this document. Oh, add external authentication middleware below. All right, that would be us. So let's take Google and put it down there. All right, let's save everything and try to compile. And that worked. So So far so good. Now there's a couple of things that I don't like. Well, let's just run it. Let's just run it and see what we get. I think it's going to give us an error after we authenticate with Google because it's not able to save the information into SQL Server, which is because I don't want it to do that, but let's just see what happens. So let's go to the login page here. And now you can see it has the sample application login on the left. If you wanted to create your account manually, we don't actually want to, and we don't want to allow that option for our product, so we're going to disable that eventually, but we'll just leave it there for now. It's not hurting anything. But on the right, you can see it says use another service to log in, and Google's listed. So if we click that, it should redirect us to Google to log in. So let's try that. Okay, so now we're at Google, and Google is saying Platinum Hydra would like to do the following: view your email address and view your basic profile info. Do you want to allow that? So this is where the user gets to opt in to sharing their information with us. So we're just going to say allow, and it's going to send back to us. Okay, and here's the database error that I was predicting. Because we haven't set up our database properly for this application. So I don't really want to continue further because this database that it's set up for is not the database that I want to use. So let's just stop there. But the positive is it looks like we were able to redirect to Google and then redirect back to us with the authentication information. So that's great. That means our Google authentication is working. We just need to figure out how to store that information now. So that's kind of the next step, because we don't want to store it in Entity Framework or SQL Server. So let's close this down. And we'll close that. Oops, probably don't want to close that down, but we'll go back to it if we need to. So if you look at the startup code that runs at the beginning of our website, you'll see a couple of things. One of them is the use SQL Server here. And since we're not using SQL Server, I'm just going to comment those lines out. And another one is add entity framework store. So this is the line of code that tells the website to store user information in using entity framework, which eventually goes to SQL Server. So again, this is what we don't want. So let's comment that out. So if you disable the entity framework components, and let's just run it again. We'll stop it and restart. I think we're going to get an error. Okay, so the error that we got this time, because we've stripped out the user store, is it's telling us that it was unable to resolve the service for the user store of type application user. So now it doesn't know how to get to our store. That's because I've taken it out. So what we need to do now is make a user store for DocumentDB, which is the database we do want to use. Now I did a little searching around on this, and I'll do a little more tonight. But if you search DocumentDB iUser Store, you'll find apparently some people have started working on this, and we may be able to just pull this in. Let's see what they inherit from. So they are implementing their own user store, and it implements iUser Store right here. So that's good. So we might be able to just pull this package in. Let's see, DocumentDB ASP.NET Identity. Let's see. I'll try this for a little bit, but if it doesn't work, what we'll do is put in a placeholder for now. DocumentDB ASP.NET. Let's see if this package is here. It is here, and it's been downloaded 4,000 times. And it was last updated in July. So let's give it a try. We'll see. Okay, so this is a great point to talk about source control. So if you ever find yourself saying, well, let's give this a try and see what happens, that's probably a good point to create a snapshot of your code using your source control system before you try that thing that may or may not work. So let's divert a little bit over to source control. And remember, we've remade our project, so we need to go in here and set up our Mercurial repository again. So let's do that. Let's see, I ought to be able to do it here. Create repository. We'll just take the defaults. And we need to make that initial commit, but we need to set up our ignore first, like we did last time. So we probably have bin and source data in here that we don't want to put. Lib is here. We don't want lib. Oh, we do want lib. We don't want bin or obj files. Actually, I don't see them here. Let's just make sure they're not here. I don't want to get those binary files checked into our source control by mistake. Looks like they're not there, so let's go ahead and just do our initial commit. Okay, so now we can see that we have no changes since we just committed a second ago. So we have a kind of a clean slate to try stuff. So let's go back to our code here, and we'll put in that library. Let's see, what was the name of that library again? This one. And we'll add that to our project. And it looks like 1010 is the latest. So we'll save that. Now it should restore automatically, which it is. Package restore failed. Okay, it's saying that this project is not compatible with NetCore. So that's probably saying it's not compatible. Yeah, see, this is not designed to work with .NET Core. It's only designed to work with the old .NET stuff, version 4.5. So we won't be able to use that package for identity. So that kind of confirmed what I suspected. So let's resave that, check our source control, make sure we don't have any modifications. So project lock has a modification. We'll just roll that back. So by using our source control, we were able to roll back to the way the code was back here in this change set. Now we're back to no changes at all. So we were able to try something and then go backwards without committing to it. Okay, so let's just take another approach. Just for today, I'm going to implement a user store that just does nothing. And that'll get us through today so we can test our Google authentication without actually having the data store do anything. So we'll just go into services and we'll just say, we'll make a new class and we'll call it do nothing user store. And if you remember the exception that we got when we tried to run the code, let's run it again and so you can see that. It's this iUser store of type application user. That's what it couldn't find. So we're going to make one, but we're just going to make one that does nothing. So let's go into our do nothing user store, and we're going to implement iUser store application user. And let's make sure we can resolve the types. And let's fix the document formatting. And now we're getting an error. The red error line is telling us we have a problem. Well, that's because we haven't implemented this interface yet. So let's just have it automatically implement this for us. And now you can see all of these methods by default are just throwing exceptions. Well, that's going to throw an exception then when we run our code. Just for a moment, let's leave it that way. We won't fix these exceptions. We'll expect that we're going to get them. But now we should be able to go back here and register that user store where we previously commented out the entity framework store. So let's add that. And we'll give it our do nothing user store. So we've replaced the entity framework store with our do nothing store. And we'll see how far that gets us. I think we're going to get one more exception though. Oh, shouldn't have closed that browser. Okay, so now we have a different error. Now we have an error because it couldn't resolve the service for the role store. So if you're familiar with ASP.NET authentication and authorization, there's actually two objects that it deals with. One is it tracks users, but it also tracks roles. So those are the roles of the users within the application. Are they administrators? Are they users? What is the role that they're functioning? So it needs a way to store and retrieve those roles. That's right here. So let's go back in here and to our do nothing user store, and let's make another one called, you guessed it, do nothing role store, which I messed up the capitalization of. And apparently I can't fix it. All right, let's delete that and try again. I can't even delete it. Let's stop debugging. Now I can rename it. And this needs to implement role store. And what was the type on that? Let's see. Of identity role. And let's add those assemblies. And again, we'll just have it automatically implement this interface for us. And then we'll go back to our startup and we'll tell it to use our do nothing role store. Not role store, role store. There we go. And now we'll compile. And now I think we're still going to get an exception, but I think it's going to be one of the exceptions that it put in here by default. So that'll actually mean it's kind of working. Let's run that. See, so it threw an exception on our dispose method on our do nothing user store, but that's kind of what we expected because that's what we told it to do. So let's take that out and we'll just let it dispose without throwing an exception. Let's save that and run again. Well, it looks like it actually worked anyway. Oh, we need to start debugging again. Aha, so now we were able to launch without throwing any exceptions because we've given it a do nothing user store and a do nothing role store. Now obviously our do nothing stores don't talk to any database on the back end. So if we log in this time, And Google probably is going to remember us. So when I click login, it's probably just going to loop right back to our application. And we're probably going to get an exception from our do nothing role store because the application is trying to either save or retrieve our user information from the database, and it's not going to know how to do that. So let's just give it a try. We'll click login. And how do we want to log in with Google? Okay, now we went to Google, and Google sent them back to us. But now we can see that we're getting an exception when it came back to say that the store is not implementing the iUser login store. So this is another interface that we need to implement. So let's just drop that on our do nothing store here. And we'll implement that. And let's see if it put dispose on there again. I don't think so. So we'll just save that, and then we'll reload here. Well, and we do implement it. iUser login store. Let's just let's recompile and try again. I'm really just trying to do the minimum required so that the framework can do its magic using our own magical props instead of the magical props that Microsoft puts in there by default. That's what I'm trying to get to. So let's go to Google. And now we got an external login callback. 44354, that's correct. And it might be because we threw an exception somewhere over here. Yeah, it's probably because we didn't save the cookie when it came back. So here it says identity external was successfully authenticated, but forbidden, and that's probably because we didn't implement something here. So the positive is that we are able to authenticate against Google, and also we've implemented, or we've demonstrated that we've replaced the entity framework user store that we don't want to use with, temporarily, we've replaced that with our do nothing user store, which just throws a bunch of exceptions and doesn't work. But this is the point where we'll start tomorrow, and we'll take one of two routes. First of all, I'll look overnight for a DocumentDB user store that's ready to go. I'll see if someone has one out there that we can use open source. If nobody has one open source, then we'll start going through the process of implementing our own to store this information in DocumentDB. So that's where we'll start tomorrow, and I'll see you then. Thanks for watching.